For those of you out of the loop, Black Pigeon Speaks had his account on YouTube terminated for supposedly violating their hate speech rules Thursday for 12 hours. Thanks to public outcry, they had to walk back their permanent ban on him. But that does not mean he or anyone else is safe from being deplatformed. Anyone who's familiar with his content knows full well that their claim of hate speech was nothing but a lie that YouTube concocted in order to justify his removal from their platform. The left has been targeting him for some time now, trying to make his removal a reality. The Carlos Maza situation, with the resulting changes to YouTube's arbitrary rules that has made them more fluid than a leftist gender, it had finally given them the excuse to remove Black Pigeon Speaks, even though he had done nothing actually wrong. At least by the standards of someone who isn't a leftist, that is. What he did do was go against the narratives of the left using well-sourced and cited videos. For that highest of cultural Marxist crimes, they tried to deplatform BPS from YouTube, claiming he was a purveyor of hate speech. They failed miserably at it too. In his case, their use of the concept of hate speech was applied correctly. If you allow me to express to you why, you will understand what I mean with saying this. In order for me to explain how Black Pigeon Speaks had his content correctly labeled as hate speech, it requires a little bit of a history lesson to do so. Now, I know some of you are probably not fans of the whole history thing, but it is necessary that we take a little trip into the past. Before we do, I just want to say that more of us should know history. It is there so we can learn from it, so we do not repeat the mistakes of those who have come before us, so we can look back and see what has led us to today. Because there are things going on around us, such as the push for hate speech being an actual thing, that have their origins being obscured by time and intentional design. An in-depth view of the origins of hate speech as a concept and the history of it leading up to today is beyond the scope of this video. I have been thinking about doing one focusing on both. If you are interested in my doing so, please let me know in the comments. All we need for me to make my case for it being properly applied to Black Pigeon Speaks is just the Cliff Notes version of hate speech. Where he's Canadian though, maybe I should give the Coles Notes version instead. Either way, this is the very abridged edition of the history of hate speech as a concept. I bet there are some of you out there who believe that as a concept, hate speech is a relatively recent product of the West. If you are one of those people, your belief is wrong. It actually owes its existence to the former Soviet Union and Marxist-Leninist communism. The idea of hate speech and it being real was a creation of the communist government of the former Soviet Union as a means to restrict speech within its borders originally. After World War II, the Soviets spread it across their satellite nations behind the Iron Curtain within the communist bloc with the same intent behind doing so. They even managed to get Western nations on board with it using the United Nations to where it is codified in international law today as well. This is what directly led to Western European nations having their own laws regarding hate speech. The idea of hate speech being real, therefore all speech must be regulated in order to protect people based on race, creed, color, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, etc., was not born out of protecting anyone being persecuted based on any of those things. No matter what someone wants to try to claim today, that never was the case. Here is how I know this. The Soviet Union, the nation that created hate speech as a concept, literally persecuted people based on all of those things. Go ask Russian Jews about the persecution they experienced living under the communist government of the USSR. The gypsies that they didn't manage to wipe out, ask them about the persecution they lived through in the Soviet Union. Go ask the Slavs and other ethnic groups that lived under the iron fist of communist rule there and in the communist bloc about the persecution they experienced. And we can't forget the LGBTQ, AEIOU, and sometimes Y crowd, because the Soviets sure didn't. One of the worst persecuted groups in the former USSR and the communist bloc were gay men. This is not an exaggeration either. Living in the closet there took on a whole new meaning for them. It wasn't just a situation of dealing with the fallout of friends, family, co-workers, and the like finding out. That was the least of their problems. If something like that got out, it meant go directly to the gulag, do not pass itdi, or collect 200 rubles, probably to never be heard from again. Let that all sink in. Why would the former Soviet Union be pushing for the regulation of all speech to prevent hate speech and by extension prevent the persecution of people when it was one of the biggest offenders doing just that? When the Soviet Union first brought their work of fiction of hate speech global at the UN, why did only authoritarian governments get on board and call for the codification of hate speech laws internationally and then did so in their own countries? Almost all of them were doing the same thing as the Soviet Union in regards to persecuting certain groups within their borders. Think about it. It clearly had nothing to do with trying to prevent the persecution of any group. Not when the Soviet Union and pretty much every nation that backed them in getting hate speech laws codified at the UN were they themselves persecuting different groups within their nations. For example, Saudi Arabia isn't exactly known for its tolerance of different groups, such as gay men, yet it was one of the nations that was a backer of the Soviet Union in hate speech laws. Go figure. This leaves us with the regulation of all speech, period. End of story. Well, not the end just yet. Just like the terms of service of YouTube regarding hate speech, minus the recent changes to make it more fluid than a leftist's gender and sexual orientation, hate speech laws are also written intentionally vague so that their scope and application can be increased over time. It was also done so that they could be used subjectively as well, which is exactly what we have seen in regards to both. In the former USSR, along with Communist Bloc, hate speech laws were used as a way to target dissidents. This is still being done in the existing communist nations of today. The political left within Western governments are using these same laws in the same exact way. Even the left in Silicon Valley is involved in the same exact targeting of people using their hate speech provisions in their terms of service. Why would they do something like this? I believe former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Stewart poignantly said it best. Censorship reflects a society's lack of confidence in itself. It is a hallmark of an authoritarian regime. The left, whether they want to admit it or not, are an authoritarian regime in the West. One that thought it had gained way more power and control over our government and the general population than they actually had. Because of this overestimation, they moved too soon in trying to bring about their cultural Marxist La La Land utopia, and it backfired on them. They were impatient and didn't believe that they needed to fully consolidate their power and take full control in order to accomplish their ideological takeover. They found out the hard way how wrong they were to believe this. In Europe and the UK, the rise of nationalism and populism in a reactionary response to the EU's ever-increasing control over member states and their loss of sovereignty was something the left did not remotely expect to happen. Brexit was a manifestation of this and a direct smack to the faces of the political left not only in the UK but also across Europe. Those who felt it the hardest were the unelected elites in the EU. It is why we've seen member nations, including the UK, ratcheting up their going after people under the guise of their committing hate speech for things like being critical of open border mass migration or for pointing out those coming in are committing crimes like rape, assaults, and robberies far higher than any other group within their countries. The left doing this is because these people are pointing out the flaws in what they are doing with trying to force this population on Europe. Flaws that they knew full well about and were hoping to keep low-key and out of the public discourse. What confidence they had in themselves in selling this as a positive thing for Europe is gone. Being authoritarians, their only choice was to increase censorship. Using hate speech laws and the threat of fine, or even worse imprisonment, is one hell of a deterrent to open public discourse. Not a lot of people are going to speak openly about a given subject if it could land them in prison, which is exactly why they are doing it. The US. We were another smack to the face to the left, not only here but across the globe with the influence our nation has over it. Hillary Clinton was supposed to be their girl in the Oval Office to usher in their plans in regards to this nation and help provide influence for them globally. That did not happen though. The American people rejected their plans for us. It's why we elected Donald Trump. Open public discourse is what facilitated this happening. It wasn't Russians or their bots. It was Americans on the internet expressing their personal opinions and disseminating news and information leading up to the 2016 presidential election. Even with the legacy media being propagandists for the DNC and Hillary Clinton, along with Alphabet rigging both Google and YouTube's algorithms favoring them, they could not win. They could not control the narrative. The fact that they couldn't really scares them too. It still does today. The left thought they had taken steps to prevent another Brexit-type situation and were overconfident as a result. They thought that the things Obama enacted as a lame duck president were going to help soften up the nation as a whole and prepare us for the ascension of Hillary into the Oval Office. The problem is, they had the opposite effect. The same people the left ridiculed in areas like the Rust Belt with telling them to go learn how to code were far more computer and internet literate than they gave them credit for. They, like a large number of Americans, weren't being prepped for the installation of Hillary as commander-in-chief. They were fighting it and they're being programmed to accept it online. Unlike in Europe and UK, the US does not have hate speech laws. This is the direct result of our having the First Amendment. It protects all speech, even speech that some might find hurtful, objectionable, or even detestable. The fact that it does this meant that the left couldn't use the government to silence opposing voices, and Silicon Valley wasn't prepared or equipped to handle doing it for them at that time. Oh, but times do change though. Now, Silicon Valley is prepared. They have had time to put everything in place to enact censorship on us on a large scale. This includes shoring up their ever-expanding and encompassing rules regarding the left's Leninist Marxist fallacy of hate speech. These are the same ones that they used to temporarily deplatform Black Pigeon Speaks until the backlash hit. The sole reason why YouTube removed him on the grounds of hate speech is because he is a dissident speaking out against the left and its flawed ideologies of cultural Marxism, identity politics, open borders, and the like. He is also exposing them and the globalists behind it all that are pulling the strings. They cannot have him doing this. Not when content creators on YouTube are able to pull in far larger audiences than even the biggest outlets in the legacy media during primetime hours. They have absolutely no confidence that their ideologically based lies and propaganda can stand up to the well-sourced, researched, cited, and produced videos of BPS. They have nothing of substance to counter them on a level playing field in the internet age. In the marketplace of ideas, going up against him, they will lose. They clearly know this too. Black Pigeon Speaks is not the average content creator. The substance and depth of his videos is far more substantial compared to the overwhelming majority of us operating in similar circles out here. No offense. The same could also be said with his work in comparison to the legacy and new media besides. They know that if he remains on YouTube, they can't use the typical attacks that the left uses to demonize the rest of us. There would be no way they could smear or malign him, which is why they tried and failed to remove him. The only option that remained for the left, not having any way to counter BPS, was to try to deplatform him and limit his speech. The new gender fluid-like nature of the hate speech rules was the only way they could try to accomplish this. The added bonus with using it, at least in regards to some, is the manufactured stigma associated to having your speech labeled as hate speech. Mind you, that effect is getting weaker by the day, but at least for now it is still there, and it might have stuck if they didn't reinstate his account. If you made it this far and listened to my stance on why Black Pigeon Speaks content was correctly labeled as hate speech, I hope you now understand why I said this. Because it is true. The concept of hate speech was used as intended with him. It was used to silence his speech no differently than how the Soviets had used the concept of it to silence political dissidents in the USSR. The reason why, because he himself is one. Anyone who speaks out against the left and the things they are trying to force upon us is a political dissident. I am one with the content I create. If you create content doing it, you're one too. If you shitpost, post memes, troll the left and leftists online, and counter their ideologies, you are one as well. We are all dissidents they need to silence. Claiming we are purveyors of hate speech is one of a variety of ways they're going to do it too. Right now, Black Pigeon Speaks needs your support and to see that we have his back. If you do not have an account over at BitChute, now is the time to get yourself one and subscribe to him over there. The link to his page over there will be in the description, along with some related reading in regards to hate speech and hate speech laws. In all honesty, with what is going on with censorship online and YouTube ratcheting it up, it would probably be a good idea for you to make an account there, regardless of subscribing to him. If you are a content creator and haven't done this already, you are only asking for trouble. Without a presence there, you have nothing to fall back on. With how people are quitting YouTube over what is going on, if they are a subscriber of yours, you lost them as one. You need to treat creating your content like a business, because YouTube sure is with how they are demonetizing and removing it from their platform, along with doing the same to content creators themselves. Diversify yourself and expand your reach. Find yourself new subscribers and supporters on alternative platforms like BitChute. Even if someone is using both it and YouTube to consume content, they may never come across yours with just being on Alphabet's platform. Trust me, I know this from personal experience with how YouTube has been rigging things against me. I have been shadow banned pretty much since the beginning of my creating content out here. I have had YouTube on more than one occasion steal views from me and have witnessed it in real time looking at my analytics while they are. Social Blade has caught them doing it, pulling my channel data when they have been just a little too greedy and put my total views for a given day well into the negative, such as with a few weeks ago. They have severely limited my reach on their platform. As of making this video, I have 334 subscribers there. The only reason why I'm at that number is I have made a few videos that were YouTube leftist ideology friendly on the note of the content, such as with my videos criticizing the Don of La Soya Nostra himself, Sargon of Akkad, for example. They were gracious enough to let those videos garner some views, and that helped me gain roughly 35 subs there between them. What can I say? Because they thought I was being a good little boy, they threw me some crumbs. In saying that, don't think I'm not appreciative of what subscribers I have there, because I am very appreciative of them. BitChute in comparison with the same exact content, I am getting close to breaking 3 times the number of subscribers there than I have on YouTube. Right now I'm sitting there at 877, which is at the making of this video. The fact that I am makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I'm not doing anything different between the two, yet I can clearly show that there is a substantial difference between the two like that. In theory, this should not be happening, just by the sheer difference in site usage and size between the two. On a level playing field where YouTube isn't manipulating things, my channel size, growth, and engagement should be substantially higher on YouTube than it is on BitChute. Common sense and simple math say this should be the case. Here I am, though, showing that it is happening. The point of my bringing this all up here at the end, and I guess it is the moral of the story, to put it very simply, you don't want to end up like I have. But if you do, and YouTube has done to you what it has to me, or what it tried to do to Black Pigeon Speaks, you should have contingency plans in place to ensure that even though you take the hit, you are not out of the game. If I didn't have my contingency plan, which thankfully included BitChute, I would have had absolutely no clue to what YouTube was doing to me. I would have looked at what was happening there and took it as my content sucked. No one wanted to watch it, and maybe I should just pack it in, which it is clear that is exactly what they wanted me to do and still want me to do. Bottom line, even though you should hope for the best, always plan for the worst. It can definitely pay off in the end. If you liked this video, depending on where you are watching it, please give it an upvote or thumbs up. If you want to know when new content of mine hits the internet, don't forget to subscribe to one or more of my social media or video accounts listed here. Also, with YouTube, don't forget to ring that bell. You can find all of my video content on both BitChute and YouTube. This may not be the case with other places I upload to, but I will try to minimize this happening. You are always welcome to interact with me at any of these sites on the list, so feel free to do so. If you have anything you want me to cover in a video when it comes to news or current events, send it right along to me. I will try to do my best to cover it. As always, thank you for watching.